Well, the utility Rand Water now confirming it started to cut back the amount of water it's giving to two big municipalities by 20%. The company says it's limiting the amount of water it's sending to the Grootes municipality in the Free State and to the Merafong municipality in Gauteng. That's because Grootes owes the company over 60 million rand. Merafong owes, as I understand it, over 800 million rand. Rand Water says it's had what is described as endless negotiations with the two councils, and they're simply not paying up. Miyelani Holeni is the chief advisor, the group chief advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting. Miyelani, good afternoon to you. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Municipalities can't pay Rand Water, they can't pay Eskom. I mean, they can't pay their debts.
Absolutely. I think we are facing a situation where municipalities are showing a critical instability within their revenue as well as within the service delivery. And I think Rand Water stands, to be able to limit the debt, that is being incurred on their side. In part is correct, but on the other side, it also has an impact with regards to how the residents are going to at least, get clean water and be able to have water which is essentially a human right. But the issue of municipalities owing Rand Water is very similar to those municipalities which are owing Eskom as well, because it places a burden within the balance sheet of Rand Water.
Some cases surely would be impossible to resolve. I mean, if Merafong owes Rand Water over 800 million rand, and if you look at the area around Merafong, sort of Carltonville, I can't see how Merafong would ever be able to pay that amount of money back. It just doesn't have the people, enough people earning enough of an income for it to do that.
Definitely. I think we must balance as well the two issues that Rand Water, for perhaps, for good reasons, have allowed, the debt, to build up to close to R1 billion. Let's assume that, there is definitely good reason, which is, providing water to the community. But, Stephen, the design of municipalities which do not have industry are the ones that are suffering the most. So if we do our analysis across the municipalities that were listed in the press release from Rand Water, it's essentially municipalities that don't have strong industry, don't have strong revenue supporting them. So as you correctly point out, it's not going to be possible for a municipality like Merafong to be able to pay over that particular debt, which calls obviously for a different model of how to finance, for instance, water, and how to deal with, for organs of the state to deal with each other with regards to services that must be purchased from the other to supply. So in this case, I think it calls for a different way of dealing with Merafong. There have been incentives as well as write-offs that were proposed on the Eskom side. Perhaps it's time to also look at how all of that, works out. On the second hand, or on the other hand, Mfuleni has been taken over, or at least Rand Water is supporting Mfuleni to be able to run their water services infrastructure. Perhaps there needs to be a way of looking at how to help municipalities to run their water infrastructure so that it doesn't fall behind servicing the residents.
I mean, in the Eskom case, we've seen the National Treasury sort of offering councils money if it agrees to implement things like prepaid meters. If Merafong just is never going to be able to pay the money, as you point out, it's Rand Water who ends up carrying the sort of financial can, in the same way that Eskom carries the can with other municipalities that owe it money, is the National Treasury just going to have to bail everybody out, and the National Treasury can't keep doing that?
Yeah, and I think that is where at least, the current trajectory shows that the National Treasury will be kept quite busy with regards to bailing out, various, municipalities. But really, I think, the issue is not the bailout. The issue is being able to run that service as professionally with the skills that are required with the right financing model. Because even water is sold to the communities, is sold to industry and so on. So there is revenue that is derived from the supply of water, and that in itself, can allow for a public-private partnership that, can partner with specifically to water. And we've seen it in other places like Mbombela, where they have cellular mines, where they've created, a specific way of delivering water in such a way that it's sustainable. So we're looking for sustainable models as opposed to bailouts from National Treasury. In the first instance, perhaps there is some kind of extension by National Treasury of support and help, which is financial, but I think we need to call for all of the water departments, all the electricity departments, to look at sustainable models and ways of how to organize themselves to be able to earn revenue, be able to account for revenue, but maintain the infrastructure and support the collection through the revenue department of municipalities. So really it calls, I think, for a different thought process to support, the fact that, it's a revenue generating function and therefore can attract investors or public or partners to be able to partner with those particular municipalities.
Can we just copy what Bombela did and take it to and sort of paste it in Merafong, or would it have to be a different solution?
Well, I think the solution and the nuances may differ slightly, but in this case, it's a long-term type of an agreement which would have to look at replacing bulk water pipes and also dealing with water losses. So I think the benefit of any partnership is there must be upside for both parties. In this case, municipalities are suffering serious water losses, so it must be able to address water losses on the one. It must improve the quality of service that is rendered, and it must make the service of value so that residents or consumers or business or industry can pay, and it must be metered properly so that there are no discrepancies as well as queries. So that kind of a model is one particular model implemented a while ago, which perhaps can be looked at with modifications as well as improvements, given that we've now understood how systems must be put together, we've now understood how operating models must be put together.
In this case, it's two smaller councils, Nkwate and Merafong. But in Gauteng, the bulk of Rand Water's revenue must come from Joburg and Ekurhuleni. Tshwane gets it from another source, if I remember correctly. But Joburg and Ekurhuleni, I mean, do they have the same kind of problem, big metros like that?
Well, I think generally, and I think I put a general statement here in that, and maybe just to add, Tshwane as well buys water from Rand Water, or also on the outskirts as well in terms of, the other areas. So generally, I think, we've seen municipalities come under pressure, and metros have also come under pressure for that, for the same reason of having had COVID, having had various transitions that are coming through. They are doing much better, but I think the smaller municipalities are the ones that are struggling a lot more because of the lack of industry, the lack of a revenue base, and so on. But I think the problem, hence, with putting a broad brush across the board, is to say there needs to be a lot more support around how to strengthen the revenue generating functions within municipality. And no doubt, I think the metros can also benefit with also relooking at their models of how they supply water, whether there's a municipal-owned entity, whether it's supplied from internally as in part of the metro like Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. There needs to be a strengthening of those operating models so that it supports a greater generation of revenue and I suppose revenue assurance with regards to going forward. So yes, the big ones may not be immune, but the problem is of a lesser extent, but calls on at least starting to think ahead of how to resolve such problems before they materialize.
Miyelani, I mean, for all of that to happen, you need political will. There'll be big political fights. People want to hold on to the power that they have, the usual story. Do you think there's a sort of door opening for change, that the situation's getting so bad that change has to happen and that people are finding a way to manage it?
I think the very nature of cooperative governance, calls for various stakeholders. I think the maturity that is required in this case is to be able to understand how each one of the role players and what role are they playing and what contribution are they making. And I think the cooperative governance model calls for a center, and the center can always be the municipality that holds together all the various stakeholders that can play a role here. For instance, the Department of Water Affairs now is having to take on a lot of different projects which some municipalities were not able to complete, and they are having to pour money into those projects. Therefore, it makes them a critical stakeholder from a financing point of view, Also from an expertise point of view, why not tap into their expertise as well as, work with them to be able to get out of the situation so that you can have a better service, a more strengthened service, and so on. So I think the cooperative governance model is now being called into question and calling for greater maturity, especially among the various stakeholders that are involved there. I think the temptation is always that, if other stakeholders come on board, they will take away from the function. Rather, we need to look at, what those benefits are that, one has mentioned, of eliminating losses, of providing a quality service, as well as, the generation of revenue. If it ticks all those boxes, it means that it gives, at least a platform for that cooperation to start taking place.